Thank you. I just realized a few minutes ago that I have been a theosophist for 50 years this month. And for those of you who don't know me, I grew up in a theosophical family. My grandparents were theosophists and so on. So the Theosophical Society and Camp Indralai on Orcas Island have been a very big part of my life. I began studying astrology 52 years ago when I was 14. And it's been a passion and something that seems like a natural way for me to help understand the universe and where we are in it and why things happen, how things happen. And it's a great aid to understanding relationships, not just personal relationships, but relationships country to country and events and all kinds of things. So it's been a great tool. I know we're in a very challenging time. And I knew that I really had to talk about astrology before the election because there's so much interesting stuff going on. And I thought I would try to make sense out of it from an astrological perspective. Forgive me if I slip into astrological jargon at times. For me, it's a symbolic language, and one word can mean a great deal of things to me, and it might not mean the same thing to you. So I will try to do my best. There's going to be a historical perspective and examples and charts for you to look at here. This here is the star Sirius. I thought it was a nice picture. Sirius is an important star for the Earth and the spiritual hierarchy here. This is a reminder that the secret doctrine is full of spiritual information of all kinds. It says Sirius was called the dog star. It was the star of Mercury or Buddha, called the great instructor of mankind before other Buddhas. Okay, I have to resize that. I gave a talk, I don't know, it was maybe a year ago, and I was talking, one of the things I talked about was the coming conjunction of Saturn, Pluto, and Jupiter in the sign Capricorn. And that's been going on, and it's already started. And it's interesting that let's see, this was in 2019, just before the solstice, the winter solstice, around December 17, 19, 20, Saturn and Jupiter were moving into Aquarius, and they were all very close together here on November 12th, 2020 in the night sky. These represent different cycles beginning. You have Pluto and Jupiter together, beginning a new cycle of their own. You have Saturn and Pluto together, creating another cycle, and then Jupiter and Saturn together, beginning a third cycle. So these are all in the sign Capricorn at the time. And Capricorn is the sign having to do with government, administration, and big business. That will start to make more sense as we go along. Here, I've got to resize this a little bit. there. Okay, the Saturn-Pluto conjunction of January 2020. I talked about this before as being, it was something astrologers were looking forward to, not necessarily in a good way, but that it was significant. And let's see, so this coincided with a lot that was going on in government. I'm trying to think, this is October. So, and with the emergence of the COVID-19 epidemic. Saturn, prior conjunctions of Saturn and Pluto happened during World War I in 1914. And that's the beginning of the cycle of Saturn and Pluto. And when they moved into opposition with each other in 1931, the Depression began. So you can see astrologers don't have a good correlation with Saturn, Pluto, difficult aspects. In 1947, another conjunction happened, and it roughly coincides with the beginning of the Cold War. And the opposition aspect that formed years later happened during 1961 and the Bay of Pigs fiasco. So there's a relation to the beginning part of the era. Another one happened in 1982 during the Reagan era, beginnings of the Reagan era. And Jupiter, Saturn, and Pluto were all in Libra together. And the Reagan era was actually very important in American history. The opposition of Saturn and Pluto happened at 9/11, 2001. And we all know what happened then. That brought dramatic changes to the country, actually. So in a sense, the Saturn-Pluto conjunction opposition has to do with ideological battles leading to transformation in government once the worst has manifested. Saturn is beginning to move into the sign Aquarius. This will bring a shift in energy for the world. I wanted to note a few other times Saturn was in Aquarius. It can represent difficult times for the United States. It happened from January of 62 to December of 64. And during that time, JFK was assassinated and the beginnings of the Vietnam War were happening. In February of 91, to January of 1994, the Clinton era began, and the growth of dot-com businesses, which had, busts and booms, with Jupiter and Saturn in Taurus, the money sign, squaring Uranus, the planet of changes and upsets, in Aquarius. In 2001, Bush also had two assassination attempts during a Jupiter-Saturn period in Taurus, which really happened more in 2001. They were ineffectual attempts, but nevertheless. Prior Saturn in Aquarius was during the Depression from 1933 to 1935. Which was also a time of the rise of fascism in Germany. The USA moon is in Aquarius, and typically Saturn moving over a person's moon or opposite a person's moon is associated with difficulties in their life and some karmic reckoning. The Jupiter-Saturn conjunction that happened in January 2020, for the next 200 years, this conjunction will happen in air signs. In the past cycles, it has been happening mostly in earth signs, some fire, and has coincided with the death of presidents in office and social changes associated with that. In January of 1842, which is actually Harrison died in office of a cold after his oath of office, I think it was, in 1841. In 1861, of course, Lincoln was, there was a civil war, and then Lincoln was assassinated in 1865. In 1881, James Garfield was shot during a Jupiter-Saturn conjunction. 1901, William McKinley was shot by an anarchist in 1901. Another one in 1921, Warren Harding died in office of a heart attack. 1940 to 41, during the beginning energies of the World War II, FDR later succumbed in March of 1945. In February of 61, the Kennedy era and space travel were beginning. Aquarius is a very space and electronic oriented sign. He was, of course, assassinated in November of 63. In March of 1981, July to 1981, the Reagan era, there was Jupiter-Saturn conjunction. Reagan was shot on March 30, 1981. It was in an air sign, however, in Libra, and this could have marked a change in this pattern of every 20 years, some president dying or being shot or whatever while in office, because it was in an air sign. And he did live. In May of 2000, another one, and the Gore-Bush election, the Supreme Court actually decided the election. The conjunction was in late Taurus, and there was another dot-com bubble burst then. In 2001, there was a crazy person tried to shoot George Bush in the White House, and someone threw a grenade at him while he was in Tbilisi, Georgia, and it did not go off. And now in December of 2021 of 2020, the COVID-19 virus begins to emerge, and as Jupiter-Saturn come together at the time of the winter solstice in the first degree of Aquarius. Okay, I'm going to talk briefly about economics and astrology. This is not a comprehensive view by any means, but there's some interesting things for people to look at. In September of 29, Saturn moved towards and over the United States ascendant. The ascendant is your rising sign, and it's an important point in the chart. It usually represents the end of a cycle and the beginning of another one. And it went over in October and marked the beginning of the Great Depression. In July of 1945, Saturn went over the United States sun. This was at the time when World War II was ending, and it represented a culmination and a beginning of a new economic cycle for the United States and in effect for the world. It's a time of accomplishment. In August 15th, 1971, President Nixon took the US off the gold standard, which tied the dollar to the price of gold. And it coincided with a Jupiter-Pluto conjunction in Virgo, an Earth sign. The money supply was no longer tied to gold, so it could increase without being tied to the gold price. It's interesting that in spring of 2020, the CARES Act stimulus package happened during another Jupiter-Pluto conjunction, this time in Capricorn, another Earth sign. And the money supply has increased by trillions. In November of 2020, November 12th, remember that first picture I showed you of Jupiter, Saturn, and Pluto together? It's happened before in the last year, but this will be the third coming together of those three planets. And it represents new economic, social, and political cycles that have been started since the first conjunction in 2020. And November, of course, is election time. This is very close to the election day. So from 2020 to 2021, Jupiter and Saturn will both be in Aquarius. And to me, it represents a time of social reforms. Jupiter and Saturn in Aquarius represents to me the possibility of more humanitarian approach to world problems and people helping each other, and possible good things. Uranus in Taurus leads to reforms in our economic system. That's a long, Uranus moves slowly. It's been in Taurus for over a year, and it stays in a sign for about 7 years. It's going to move slowly through Taurus and bring many changes on the economic front, and also to natives, people who have Taurus prominently in their horoscope. I'm a Taurus. I know it really has had profound effects on my life. Okay, Jupiter, Saturn conjunction. Saturn, the planet of distancing, moves into Aquarius, the social sign, December 17th, 2020. The term social distancing came into effect not long after that. Jupiter, which is the principle of expansion and social justice, moves into Aquarius on December 19th, 2020, and Jupiter was conjunct the Saturn exactly on the solstice, December 21, 2020. So you can see that conjunction along with the solstice was a very important time. One of the big social justice things that's going on, of course, is Black Lives Matter, which really arose from George Floyd being killed in May of 2020. People are questioning the police departments, and there's been a lot of demonstrations all over the world since then with regards to social inequalities. So now we have a new cycle of the social contract beginning. It is just emerging, and there's a lot more to be seen. Jupiter-Pluto conjunctions are associated with pandemics. This one happened during the Spanish flu in 1918. In 2020, it was located in 22 to 24 degrees of Capricorn. So people who are Cancers and Capricorns have really been affected by these conjunctions in Capricorn, and depending on where your planets are and so on. Jupiter, in a broad sense, represents heaven, and Pluto, hell in mythology. And there's a battle going on in a way. Now I want to, because I started studying Vedic astrology a long time ago, due to some fortuitous friendships and meetings with people, including James Kelleher, a very well-known Vedic astrologer, one of the most important in the United States, actually. I met him before he was an astrologer, and we both went for an astrology reading from a man who became his teacher named M.K. Gandhi from Bombay, India. And it was very fascinating, and I learned from both James and Mr. Gandhi some about Vedic astrology. I have to say it's very complex. I'm never going to claim to be an expert on it, but it's fascinating because Vedic astrology is more fatalistic, you might say. We come into this life with a plan for the life, and Vedic astrology is very good at outlining that plan. And it divides your life up into different periods ruled by different planets. And depending on how well or how adversely those planets are positioned in your Indian horoscope, can give you a good idea of how a period of time will manifest in your life. Okay. So they use the sidereal astrology, which is approximately 23 degrees ahead of the tropical astrology, which we are familiar with, and starts Aries at the spring equinox on the first day of spring. It incorporates these things called nakshatras, which are basically 27 lunar subdivisions of the 360 degrees zodiac. It divides your life up into what are called mahadashas. You could interpret that as a major period, which each have sub-periods called Bhuktis. I will probably refer to it as major periods and sub-periods. Having given that little introduction on Vedic astrology, I don't have a great way of transferring Vedic charts to PowerPoint yet. So I'm showing you here what is, okay, let me adjust Donald Trump's horoscope. Hang on. And this is his Western horoscope. Some of you are familiar with it, I'm sure. He's a Gemini with moon in Sagittarius. He was born at a full moon, and the Hindus consider that very auspicious. And so he has a strong Gemini, Sagittarius energy with the last degree of Leo rising and the planet Mars on his ascendant, which that Mars there on his ascendant gives him his tendency to bully people, which is well known. And he has the planet Neptune in the house of financial matters, which Neptune is a planet associated with potential for deception. And it is square his Mercury in the 11th house there in Cancer. So that would tell you that he has a difficulty telling the truth quite often. But the interesting thing is, this Gemini Sagittarius axis is one of the main reasons he got elected. The United States chart has Sagittarius rising. His moon in Sagittarius is on the USA ascendant. His sun, North Node, and Uranus are on the 7th house cusp of relationships. So there's a real synchronicity of vibrations there, and gave him enough popularity to pull it off. Also, the United States moon is conjunct to 7th house cusp. And as appalling as he is to many people like him very much, depending on your background and political leaning and so on. So there are some very strong tie-ins with his chart and the chart of the United States. It was very interesting for me to see from a Hindu standpoint that he began what is called a Jupiter major period on, that should be 2016, not 1916, sorry, right at the election time when he got elected. I mean, Jupiter is a planet of increase, of abundance, of expansion, and right at election time, Jupiter just came in strong in his life and gave him, or helped him have the kind of power he wanted, and got away with a lot of stuff. And but each major period is broken up into sub-periods. And he began a Saturn sub-period December 28, 2018, that lasts until July 2021. So he's still in that sub-period, and Saturn is much more difficult for him. This would help to slow him down. And interestingly, these sub-periods have sub-periods. And Hindu astrology gets really complicated. I won't go into it, but it's interesting. There's a sub-period of Mars that he's in right now from August 30th to October 23. And that means that he's in a kind of a Saturn-Mars subperiod. And that is not an easy one for anyone. Okay, so this is not a favorable period for him, obviously. And he begins a Saturn-Rahu sub-period. Rahu is the north node of the moon. That begins on October 23 through March of 2021. These are not helpful to him, and from an election standpoint. It's also interesting to note that Trump has a yoga called Viparita Raja Yoga in his Hindu chart, which the traditional meaning is that he has success due to someone else's losses. Okay, so looking at his Western chart now, I will just go over some energies that are happening. Saturn will oppose his Venus on September 6th and October 20th of this month. This is not something that would aid his popularity, and it would he would lose favor with women. It is also a very bad financial transit. Not, well, all we know is that they've released his tax returns, and that he owes a lot of money to somebody. This will come up later. Right now, Mars is retrograde in the sign Aries, and that will change November 13th. But it shows plenty of conflict and the potential for voter suppression during the election. This is true for everyone. It can represent underhanded activity. Mars, which represents our assertive nature, here is retrograde, meaning that it can't be assertive in a straightforward, normal way. What that means to me is that there will be a lot of, dirty tricks and things going on during this election cycle. The North Node transited over his sun on October 1st, which coincided with him getting and announcing his COVID positive result and then entering the hospital. I haven't been watching the news today, but I'm sure CNN has been talking about it all day. The North Node is traditionally an enemy of the sun in astrology, because when the sun is close to the node, that's when you have eclipses. And eclipses are historically associated with the downfall of kings and things like that. Right now, the North Node is also opposing his moon, and he has a North Node return. That means the North Node is moving over the place it was when he was born on October 26th and 29th. Very close, right before the election. Again, this should indicate challenges with women, family, real estate, and it shouldn't be helpful to popularity. The North Node is in his 10th house of career, which shows great ambition and ruthlessness in his case. Pluto will oppose his Venus again February 17th and July 2021, which could be indicative of severe financial strain and difficulty in marriage and possible health issues. His progressed moon will be moving into his second house on March 9th, 2021, which shows that over the next couple of years, he getting his financial affairs in order will be primary to him. And he'll have lots of time when he's not elected. But I think he's going to have a hard time financially. In other words, this is Joe Biden's chart. Let me briefly say that you can see over on the left side, he has 4 planets in Scorpio, including Mars, Mercury, Sun, and Venus. 3 of them are in his 12th house. The 12th house is associated with government and institutions. People with a strong 12th house tend to work behind the scenes. And Scorpio is a secretive sign by nature. They don't like to put everything on the surface by any means. So, but he has Sagittarius rising, which helps to counteract that natural secretiveness and makes him more outgoing and friendly than he would have been if he had, Scorpio rising. His Sagittarius rising also ties him in with the rising sign of the United States of America, and is the one thing that helps him rise to the top during this election season. His moon is also in Taurus, so he is security oriented, interested in finances and the economy a great deal. It'll be interesting to see where, well, it'll be obvious that if he's elected, the focus is going to be on getting the economy going again. And, and Scorpio is also associated with healing. So this getting the country healed, so to speak, and back on track financially will be a big part of his administration, regardless. His this 4 degrees Sagittarius rising, I think, is a good omen. It's a good position. So Biden's transits and progressions. For him, the planet Neptune is transiting over his 4th house cusp of the home and opposing his midheaven of career. This is a little troubling as the 4th house has to do with the end of life issues and could symbolize approaching senility. People have, gotten after him for his gaffes. Sagittarius rising tends to promote sticking your foot in your mouth, but so some of that is just part of his nature. But there could be something to this, that he is getting old. Neptune is one of the outer planets which can indicate reaching masses of people in a significant way. It can also, while transiting, indicate deception happening in one's life. His progressed moon makes a beautiful conjunction with Venus on October 1, 2020, which increases his popularity. Most would agree that he won the first debate largely due to the behavior of President Trump. This effect should hopefully last a month until the election. It will help garner the women's vote during the election. That could be a deciding factor. Right after the election, his progressed moon sextiles his progressed Mars exactly on November 8th, which will provide energy and enthusiasm to his cause. From a Hindu perspective, Joe Biden, from April 22, 2020, last spring, to September 20, 2022, which is over 2 years, he is in a Jupiter major period with a sub-period ruled by Rahu, or the north node of the moon. Jupiter is very well placed in his 9th house, and it is also exalted in Cancer. So Jupiter for Joe Biden is a strong and powerful asset. Rahu, or the north node of the moon, is in his 10th house of career and public standing, showing this to be a time of a pinnacle in his career. So these are basically good influences for him. Here is a chart of the United States of America. As you know, there's a lot of controversy about what time was the United States born. My friend James Kelleher, who I told you about, who's an excellent astrologer, was actually paid by someone to research this timing. And a rich person, in other words, because it took hours, many, many hours, and a lot of trips to the library and studying American history and so on and so forth. And he found this time of 6:30 p.m. on July 4th, 1776 in Philadelphia to be the most likely time for the birth of the United States, America, according to July 4th. And it gives the last degree of Sagittarius rising, which suits the nature of our country pretty well. The United States likes to think itself as a friendly country, open to immigrants, and it likes to be friends with everybody. But it also has 4 planets in Cancer in the 7th house, meaning that it's also very self-protective. That Venus-Jupiter conjunction in Cancer near the sun of the United States is indicative of the great wealth this country has developed. The 7th house also represents open enemies in mundane astrology. And we've had plenty. The moon is in Aquarius, a humanitarian sign. It's also in a very good part of Aquarius, representing, from an esoteric standpoint, a part of Aquarius that is more open to the Aquarian age, group work, the great changes that have to happen in society. The United States has often been called a melting pot. It's an experiment in group work of getting people from all over the world, of every background, race, creed, color, religion, and so forth, together, working together towards common goals. And this chart seems to work pretty well. For instance, Aries is on the 4th house of home and real estate and so on. And Aries is the sign of the pioneer. Pioneering was a main aspect of the growth of this country because it was so large and started out on the East Coast, basically. And it took pioneers to conquer the country. There's many other examples, but the strong 7th house of the United States chart shows that we are very much involved in relationships with other countries, world affairs, and have strong interest in the rule of law. Now, that chart is interesting in itself, but more specifically to the times we are in. For the United States, we are in Vedic astrology in a Rahu period, or a period ruled by the north node of the moon, from September of 2015 until September of 2033. And the north node is in the 8th house, which is associated with other people's money, finance, taxes, death, and transformation. The Rahu is associated with technology especially, and Uranus. So this is really a time of great technological advancements happening here in this country. but it will also represent changes that have to happen in our financial system. Okay, again, every major period is broken up into subperiods. We begin a Saturn subperiod on November 1, 2020, and this lasts until September 8th, 2023. We have Saturn and Rahu together are not a happy couple. This Saturn represents, karmic timing and a difficult period for the United States. Saturn in the 10th house of the US chart represents our strong leadership position in the world. And this will be challenged. And the 10th also represents our president. There could be a change in leadership during this period. So basically, the Saturn-Rahu sub-period is not going to be an easy one, and you don't have to be an astrologer to figure that out. And it's interesting that it happens at a time that we pretty much know will be strongly affected by the economic effects of the COVID pandemic. There was a previous Saturn-Rahu period from November 1, 1900 to September 8, 1903. During that time, McKinley was elected and then shot by an anarchist, of all things. Okay, for predicting presidential elections, one important chart to look at is the horoscope of the inauguration, because that represents the beginning of a 4-year term of a president. And it's pretty easy to plot these out. Although, remember when Obama was inaugurated and Chief Justice John Roberts botched the oath of office? They actually had Obama do it over again later in the evening with Justice Roberts in the White House, and that time was recorded also. But that's just an interesting historical aside. So for 2021, typically these inaugurations are set, they're set by the Constitution. They have to happen on January 20th and at noon, which means that it's usually a few minutes after noon when the oath of office is completed. The chart for the inauguration sets the tone for the administration. And there's good things and difficult things in this chart. One thing that would tend to make me think that Joe Biden is going to win is that the Venus is in the 9th house of foreign affairs. Venus here, dealing with foreign affairs, would indicate a lot of repair work and relationship work going on with other countries and allies around the world. It is a much softer approach to, friendlier approach to world relations than what happened with Trump. For Donald Trump, his inauguration chart of 2017 only had Pluto in the 9th house. Pluto represents spies and subterfuge, the involvement of things like the Russians in our elections, and and really kind of a destruction of many relationships around the world in foreign affairs that Trump has stepped on. So his chart, inauguration chart, was very odd in that respect. Pluto is still here near the midheaven, but the higher aspect of Pluto has to do with rebuilding, and Pluto will have to do that. This chart shows the Sun, Saturn, Jupiter, and Mercury together in Aquarius in the 10th house of this inauguration chart. To me, this shows a much more cautious approach to government, a steady, cautious approach. And Jupiter and Mercury together represents the potential for wisdom and understanding and a much more sane approach to government than what we saw before. But what you should also note, if you look over on the left-hand side, it'll show Taurus rising at about 16 degrees. You will see the moon in Aries, not far away from a conjunction of Mars and Uranus in Taurus. This Mars-Uranus conjunction is square the Sun, Saturn, Jupiter conjunction in Aquarius. In basic astrology, Mars conjunct Uranus is an explosive aspect. And traditionally, when presidents have not fulfilled their terms of office, several things come into play. For one, you can see the moon is at 29 degrees Aquarius. It is void of course in this horoscope. That means it is not making any more aspects to the planets until it moves into the sign Taurus. This is one indicator of three that a president will not fulfill their term of office. It does not mean that they're going to die. It just is an indicator that they won't fulfill their term of office. Another indicator is this Mars-Uranus square to the Sun, Saturn, Jupiter conjunction in Aquarius, okay? That is the Sun in this inauguration chart represents leadership, the president. Uranus squaring it represents a great challenge. At the very least, there's going to be a lot of social discord still that has to be remedied over the next few years, and this could indicate, more rioting, protests, and the kind of discord that we've been seeing over the last year. Just because we have a new president does not mean that those issues are going to go away. Another indicator, the third indicator that a president is not likely to finish their term is the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction. Now, this is happening in an air sign in Aquarius. Air signs are less physical than other signs. So this might, it doesn't mean they'll be assassinated or anything, but it does tend to be another indicator that the president won't fulfill their duties. Moving on, let's see, I think I've gone over some of this stuff already. Yes, pretty much. So anyhow, the Sun, Saturn, Jupiter, and Pluto in the 10th house of the Inauguration Chart shows a seriousness and carefulness by the administration in carrying out its duties. Restraint and responsibility will be prevalent, unlike in the past 4 years. And this lends itself towards a different leader than Trump. So that brings me to the chart of Kamala Harris. I picked her before she was picked to be the vice president nominee. And it's mainly because she has an incredible chart, basically. She is a Libra with Gemini rising. Remember again, Americans love that Gemini-Sagittarius opposition. So if you have Gemini or Sagittarius, it does help garner popularity with the American people. She also was born within maybe a minute of a full moon. In Hindu astrology, this is very auspicious. Another auspicious thing in her chart is that she has Saturn in Aquarius up by her midheaven, which is the best place Saturn could be. Saturn rules the 10th house of career and public standing. Saturn there is a sign of achievement and great possibilities for this person. She has Sun in Libra trine Saturn in Aquarius, and Moon in Aries trine her Mars in Leo. These are aspects associated with many presidential charts have Moon, Mars, and Saturn, Sun aspects in them. So having said that, I said some of this, her Moon in Aries will make her a fighter for justice and a pioneer in some area. President Trump was also born just before a full moon, and Joe Biden maybe a day before a full moon. So they all have strong horoscopes. That's why picking a president is a hard thing, because only the strongest people are at the top of the litter when it comes election time. Okay, with Kamala Harris, she began a Rahu or North Node major period on July 16, 2012, which lasts until 2030. Rahu, or the North Node, forms a royal union in her chart, as it is in Gemini in the first house. North Node is well placed in Gemini. This increases her power and gives her governing ability and more public notice. She began a Mercury sub-period on June 27th, which lasts until January 15th of 2023. Mercury is her chart ruler in the Vedic system and is well placed in her 5th house and increases her abilities to communicate well. She will have a more difficult K2, or K2 is the south node of the moon, from January 15th of 2023 to 2024. But then she will begin a Venus subperiod in 2024 through 2027, which will increase her popularity and strength, which I'm giving something away here, but she might become one of our next presidents. Her chart is that strong. Okay, Mike Pence, I don't have a lot to say about him except to note that he also has a strong Gemini influence in his chart. He was born at a new moon and has the sun, moon, and Mercury in Gemini. He was born in 1959. He has a strong Venus, Mars, Uranus conjunction in Leo, which opposes the USA moon and gives him some of his strength and attraction to serving in the government of our country. So now I want to talk a little bit about esoteric astrology, including some talk on sacred and non-sacred planets. In esoteric astrology, the Earth is not as advanced as certain other planets. For instance, Mercury, Venus, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune have all evolved to higher states than the Earth. They say the Earth is becoming a sacred planet, which also has something to do with all the tumult that has occurred in the last 100 years or more. Mars and Pluto are also non-sacred planets. I mentioned the different rays associated with these planets. For those of you who are interested in that, the 7 rays are 7 streams of energy that condition our spiritual nature and our psychological being. And I'll get into that a little bit more here. Each sign is ruled not only by an exoteric ruler, but also an esoteric ruler. As we evolve, we become more open to the esoteric rulers of the different signs. You'll see Taurus is ruled by Venus exoterically, and esoterically it's said to be ruled by a planet Vulcan, which is not even a material planet, but it is referred to in the secret doctrine. Other planets or signs like Capricorn, which is an important one right now, is ruled by Saturn exoterically and esoterically. And the third ray conditions the energy of Saturn and Capricorn. So the third ray, in a more mundane sense, is associated with economics and matter, making things happen in the world. And that's why this triple conjunction in Jupiter, Saturn, and Pluto and Capricorn is really manifesting in a large financial way. With the third ray, people can use matter selfishly or unselfishly, basically. And Saturn is the taskmaster, which will take care of itself karmically with regard to the economic situation. Let me go down a little bit here. These rays also affect countries. For instance, the United States has 6-ray personality, which is associated with that Sagittarius rising, but a soul ray of the second ray of love wisdom. The 6th ray is associated with idealism And it's interesting that Russia and the United States both have a 6-ray personality. In a way, our conflicts are more like family squabbles. We have the ability to work together and become good friends, I think. China has a 3rd-ray personality. And this period, the last few years, China has become increasingly important. And it's also a time when 3rd-ray energies, like I said, having to do with the economy and economic matters, have come to the forefront. China is a major player in the world economy, and it manifests through their personality. They are great business people, and France has a 3rd-ray personality also. But this is more for people who are interested in this. It's just kind of interesting for me to look at the world situation in terms of the types of energy coming in. The planet Uranus is a bringer of 7th-ray types of energy. And so Russia actually, during this Aquarian age, might be more open as they contact their higher nature to this transformative type of energy. But right now, for a long time, they've been ruled by basically just dictators. So until that breaks, when it breaks, they're a very old country, a very old soul. Some great things could come through Russia and associated countries. Okay, as I said many years ago, Pluto in Capricorn will bring the rise of giant corporations, plutocrats, and the need to transform government, because the worst will likely manifest while Pluto's in Capricorn, so that we see the need for transformation of basic government institutions, which work hand in hand with these corporations. We knew transformation was going to need to happen, but because we resist change, the worst often has to manifest before we can enact those changes. And just seems to be happening as Pluto moves towards the tail end of Capricorn. Jupiter and Saturn, as I said, moved into Aquarius in December of 2020 at basically the same time. Aquarius represents social issues. It has a strong 7th-ray emphasis, which trends towards synthesis and unification. I am somewhat hopeful that in the next year we will see many great acts of people helping each other through group activity, which is really a very Aquarian thing. And let's see, the planet Uranus moving through Taurus would naturally want to create changes in our financial institutions. Taurus rules money and finances. Uranus also rules Aquarius, and it involves and requires transformation. And in this case, the transformation of money and resources. It will be here several more years. Our approach to money and wealth will undergo changes. We're in the Aquarian age, as they say, and Uranus is the planet that is doing much to manifest it. All group efforts that are designed to benefit humankind have their origin in this Uranian energy and Aquarian energy, and are moving towards synthesis and unity in the world. Planet Neptune's been in Pisces. I had great hope for this. Neptune rules Pisces, so it's very well placed here. Jupiter will enter Pisces. Jupiter is another co-ruler of Pisces in the Western system, and it will enter Pisces around January 30th of 2022. And they will conjunct in April of 2022. This is a strong transit that can bring in many good energies associated with spirituality, compassion, helping the less fortunate, as well as sixth and second ray energies of devotion to ideals and spiritual teaching. I should add that this could be a time when dramatic changes in our healthcare system could happen, because the 12th house has to do with hospitals, healthcare, and helping those less fortunate than ourselves. Neptune in Pisces is also good for the development of an increased spirituality in society. Some further notes on Jupiter, Saturn, and Uranus. Jupiter gives us the laws, and Saturn enforces them. Saturn makes us deal with and remove the impediments in our lives that prevent us from further spiritual progress. Jupiter gives us the capacity to receive and experience wisdom. Its relationship to Mercury in a chart, and also other planets, can show our capacity to realize wisdom. Uranus is the bringer of super cosmic energies that allow the transformation within ourselves as well as in society. It rules Aquarius and is responsible for many of the electronic transformations we see and the speeding up of life in general, including air travel, space travel now too, for that matter. Okay, getting down, that finishes what I have to say basically on the major influences going on. I think you could tell from what I was saying that I think Biden is going to win, but that there will be plenty of underhanded activity while the election is going on. Transits and the Hindu viewpoint looks stronger for Biden and Harris than for Trump. He's just not in a very good period right now. It's pretty amazing that the north node of the moon went over his sun right when he was announced to have COVID. I don't know what his health is like now, but I'm not going to speculate on that. I would say that in the last 3 years, people who have a strong Cancer influence have gone through a lot of struggles. And that can include Cancer rising, Moon in Cancer, Sun in Cancer, because all these planets, Pluto, Saturn, and Jupiter, have been making oppositions to Cancer during this time. This is also true to an extent for Aries and Libra natives. And for Capricorn, it's a time of possible great accomplishments, but it does also involve some personal sacrifice. Capricorns can achieve great things in business and society. It's also a sign associated with initiation. Capricorns who take spirituality seriously can rise to the mountaintop. Jupiter and Saturn in Aquarius will be good for Aquarians in 2021. An example of this is Amy Coney Barrett, nominated for Supreme Court Justice. She is an Aquarius, and she has her moon in Cancer. The United States is a Cancer with moon in Aquarius. You can see the double effect there. That ties her in very closely with the horoscope of the United States of America. And I pretty much expect that she will become a Supreme Court justice. People with moon or sun or Leo rising will feel more challenges beginning in 2021 as Jupiter and Saturn oppose the sign Leo. It can, these cycles happen about every 7 years, so it's nothing new for any adult. But it's always a time of adjustments that have to be made, and it's up to us how we react to them. Uranus in Taurus is bringing many changes to Taurus natives. It can free them from the past in some significant way. Melania Trump has the same birthday as me, not the same year, but I sort of expected her to go through a major change in her relationship with Donald during this last year, and maybe she has, but she didn't tell me about it. But she has something like 4 planets in Taurus, so the next several years will involve a lot of changes for her also. Okay, well, that's the end of my slide presentation. Now I'm going to allow some questions to happen. Let me see if I can read some on chat. Linda said, Saturn was the traditional ruler of Aquarius, and I'm wondering if this association was always seen as negative influence. How did the discovery of Uranus affect the influence becoming the new ruler of Aquarius? I should say that in Hindu astrology, Saturn is still considered the ruler of Aquarius. And when I look at a chart from a Hindu standpoint, I think of Saturn being the ruler of Aquarius in that chart. Planets are discovered when society is ready to receive their energy. Hence the late discovery of Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. Pluto's discovery happened not long before the development of atomic energy and the atomic bomb, interestingly, Chernobyl exploded on my birthday in 1986 when the sun was exactly opposite Pluto, representing a nuclear challenge.